Yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining this DroidCon online webinar. PWAs can do anything, including dual screen web. Justin and I are going to walk you through a little bit about the Surface Duo 2 launch that happened yesterday, a little bit about developing apps for the Surface Duo line, and then deep diving into progressive web apps and exactly how awesome they are. So the outline looks something like this. I'm going to start you with a bit of sizzle, and then dive into dual screen web development with Microsoft Edge. And then I'm going to let Justin take away all of the hot demo stuff and talking about penning and inking and getting your apps onto Google Play. But let's start with a quick look at Surface Duo 2. Hello. Okay, so there was a lot going on in that video. Just to take it back to what we're interested in today, Microsoft Surface Duo and Surface Duo 2 are Android devices. They include Google Play, and so the entire kind of Android app platform is available to run on these devices. And you can build your own Android apps, web apps, and PWAs to run on here as well. One of the highlights of that video is the amount of different applications and app scenarios you could see being demonstrated. So the two screens can do very different things. You can use them for multitasking and put one app on one side and one app on the other. You can drag and drop between them. You can have a horizontal or vertical. You can do video. You can do images, editing and preview, all sorts of combinations of apps across both screens. And if you want to focus or zoom in or really take advantage of the extra screen real estate, you can have one app spanned across both screens. So you can have, let the application decide, what content's going on the left screen and what's going on the right. And that decision, optimizing applications for when they're taking up the entire screen area, is the kind of enhancements that you would want to do for your applications or your websites to really make them shine on Surface Duo 2 and other foldable devices from other manufacturers. It also kind of highlighted the great pen support that we have, which works, in applications, but also obviously on the web. And it ships with Microsoft Edge, open source Chromium-based browser that we'll talk about today. Also includes extensions for dual screen web kind of website enhancements. So to build apps for Surface Duo, I know a lot of folks coming along to DroidCon might be native Android developers using Java or Kotlin, or maybe you're using a cross-platform framework, in addition to maybe being interested in deploying using the web. Where would you start? So I've got two links here. I recommend going to both of these to get some understanding about how to build apps for the Surface Duo and the Surface Duo 2. docs.microsoft.com/dual screen, shown on the left, includes documentation, samples, design guidance and inspiration that covers all of those things we kind of just mentioned. Apps on one screen, apps on both screens, dragging and dropping between them, using Kotlin and Java to do that, or using Flutter, React Native, C#, Unity Gaming, and the web, which we'll get to. And on the other side, Google has their own developer.android.com/large screens guide. And that's going to give you an additional piece of context about how Google's supporting dual screen devices and foldable devices. We obviously work with them closely, and all of the platforms and all of the support that we talk about is actually based on Jetpack Window Manager, which is a Google library that you can build into your applications regardless of the platform you're using. And that helps you detect devices with a hinge, find out information about the hinge. So here's a quick look at what that looks like in Kotlin. And I know we're going to talk about the web, but I really wanted to quickly cover the underlying technology. So if you use Jetpack Window Manager from Google in your Kotlin app, you include the package, obviously, and then you can put this little snippet of code or something like it in your app. And basically, it sets up your code to listen for changes in your application. So if it goes from one screen to two screens or back, your application gets a message that says, okay, there's now a hinge or a fold in your view area. And so now you have the option to do something about that. So what happens is it sends you a layout info class, and that layout info class has a collection of folding features. And notice I said collection. So Surface Duo and Surface Duo 2 only have one fold, but I guess we're thinking about the future. So you check that collection, and if there is one or more folding features, you make some decisions in your application's layout based on the bounds, the postures. Is it flat or half opened? Is it horizontal or vertical? Does the hinge occlude pixels, or is it basically just a continuous flow? So there's all this information available to your code that in Kotlin or in one of the other cross-platform frameworks, you can make decisions and adjust your layout accordingly. When you do that in one of those other platforms like Kotlin or Java or Flutter, React Native, you have access to an Android emulator. So this is available for Surface Duo and Surface Duo 2. And basically, it runs on the Android emulator that comes with Android Studio. It also gets installed if you use Unity or if you use Visual Studio. And it basically, emulates a device, but on your desktop. Microsoft recently made additions to this to support pressure-sensitive pen, to support multi-touch. So if you have the emulator running on a touch screen PC, you'll be able to interact with it really closely to it being a real device with the pen and with multi-touch and everything. So I've included a link there. You can easily find this by searching for a Surface Duo emulator on Bing or Google, and get this running as part of your development environment to do testing. The emulator includes Edge. So if we're doing these PWAs and web development that Justin's going to talk about, you can use the Android emulator for that as well. But let's zoom in a little bit on building specifically web apps for Surface Duo. What are the options available for web developers? Because that Kotlin stuff I think is interesting as a foundation, but you don't want to touch that. So on the web, we have supporting CSS and support in JavaScript for understanding if the web content is being occluded by a hinge. And we also have emulator and device testing and testing available through desktop developer tools. So let me quickly walk through each of those and set the foundation for Justin to show them off. I say here dual screen web standards. So what we're looking at, what we've been working on is W3C approved standards with partners like Intel to get these dual screen and foldable enhancements part of the open source community that everyone accepts. It's been contributing to Chromium and will be available everywhere that Chromium gets used. This is the current agreed syntax for the standards. It's implemented in Edge right now, so folks that already have a Service Duo device can see this in Edge on the device right now. So you can work on this. You can also build and test using this syntax in Edge on the desktop. So just quickly, CSS on the left, it's implemented via a combination of media queries and environment variables. So media query, web dev's very familiar with. Is it screen? Is it print? Is it something else? These media queries are going to specifically be applied to your content when Edge is spanned across both screens. So the first one, screen spanning where the folder is vertical, will apply styles just in this situation, and single fold horizontal when Edge is spanned across this way. So you can have these apply only in that situation, and if the customer is on a single screen, then they're using your standard styles. The environment variables let you customize what's happening in those styles to align to one of these hinge elements or to move controls out away from the hinge. On the right-hand side, we have the JavaScript enhancement, which is really just a single method, get window segments. And that returns a collection of rects. And if there's only one, it's just one screen. If you get back a collection of more than one, then you can interrogate them and understand that JavaScript is telling you there's multiple viewports or multiple areas that your app's being laid out on the left and right side of a hinge when Edge is on full screen. So this is the initial proposal. This is what's implemented currently. You can try this out today and check out our documentation for some examples. As with all standard discussions, things get learned, the community provides feedback, and you might have already noticed or picked this up from what I've showed here, but the CSS extensions as they're shown here really aren't as extensible as the JavaScript one or as the Kotlin example I gave. If you recall, I was mentioning that the Kotlin method and get window segments both can return a collection, so they can deal with more than one hinge. But this CSS proposal, kind of as it is, does not. So the updated standard, and you can find the draft online, and we'll share these links at the end of the talk, is actually going to change the final syntax of the CSS media queries so that they can support one view pane, two, or multiple. So the new syntax, horizontal viewport segments, is followed by a number or an index or an array, like an index of an array. So in this case, we're showing the equivalent of the previous syntax. When there's horizontal viewport segments, there's two of them, applied this style, and similarly for vertical. If there were three, that would be a double hinge device. If there were four, that would be an accordion. And similarly, the environment variables have changed. So they're indexed as well when you're finding out the widths of each of those viewports. And JavaScript, the syntax has changed slightly. The property is now visual viewport.segments, but it still returns a collection of rects. So these are in progress, and watch our blog. We'll be sure to share when this stuff is available for testing. And finally, before I hand over to Justin, if you're a web developer and you don't want to grab the Android emulator, you haven't yet rushed out and bought a Service Duo or a Service Duo 2, you can test right inside Edge or Chromium on the desktop in the current browser with the current debugging tools that you already use. So there's a Service Duo emulator that's available. It's behind a feature flag, and how to turn that on is in the link on the screen. Once you choose Service Duo, you get additional icons to kind of span and unspan. So that little icon in the top right there will help you simulate, like folding the device from here to here. And here's an example of how the media query works. So you can see that the yellow div in this example is spread out across the top of only one side of the screen. And you can see the width and the left properties are being calculated using a combination of view width and the environment variables that I just shared. So you can check this out later, but I'm going to hand it over to Justin now to talk about how these concepts, the simple addition of CSS and JavaScript ways to interact can make your progressive web apps shine.
Yep, cool. So I'm Justin Willis. I'm a software engineer here at Microsoft. I work on all things kind of PWA and web related. And yeah, today I want to talk about progressive web apps and dual screen devices. and how you could use those CSS that Craig just kind of showed to expand your PWAs to support dual screen devices. So give me just 1 second while I share my screen. Let's see. There we go. All right. Okay, cool. So just to get started. So I always like to start out with, so PWAs, progressive web apps are kind of this a newer thing. So I always like to start out with like kind of the, 3 key questions that most people have. What is a PWA? Why would I be interested in them? And how do I kind of get started with them? So real quick, progressive web apps, or PWA for short, they kind of combine the best of like web and native applications. So for example, with the web, you get a couple of really cool things, right? You get ease of distribution. So if you've ever, deployed a website or a web app, you choose your hosting service, you deploy your built files, and boom, you have your website on the online. Of course, maybe you got to set up your domain and stuff, but it's basically that. And once you put it up on the web, anyone in the world with any device that has a web browser can then access that. That's really powerful. It also gives you control of your own updates, right, too. So if you have a web app or a website, you can push updates as much as you want, because all you're doing is just republishing the files to your web server, right? So they're also able to be, so that's kind of the cool things of webs, right? You get the ease of distribution. You also get cross-platform by default. So we're talking about dual screen devices today, but of course there's single screen Android devices, there's Windows devices, there's Mac OS devices, etc. That your web app can be used on too. So that's one code base, one app that could then work across all those different devices. And then you also get the ease of development. So ease of development, web applications, web apps, there's a huge community around it. A lot of it's open source. There's many libraries, lots of people who do develop web applications. So through that, normally web apps tend to be able to be developed faster and easier by the same size team from the studies that I've seen. So PWAs take that and they combine that with the capabilities and power of native applications. So the good thing about native apps is they've always had full access to, the full suite of capabilities and APIs on a device. So you can take full advantage of the power of that device, all the capabilities that it may provide, etc. PWAs combine those two things. So you get to the capabilities and power of native applications provided by new APIs that are available in Chromium. So that includes the new Edge, but also Google Chrome and others, Samsung Internet, for example. But PWAs are still web apps at their core. So they're still, running in the browser underneath the hood, still just JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. And because they are combining these two things, right? So they're meant to have an app-like experience. They can be shipped to the Google Play Store, the Microsoft Store, etc., using a tool actually that I'll show here in a minute. Now, why? So I think the what almost kind of answers the why for PWAs. Just reading the first what part, there's a lot in there that that I think most development teams like, right? But really, the why for me, when I like to sum it up, is it allows you to build, you or your team to build one app with one code base and then deploy that app everywhere with no loss of capabilities, including dual screen devices. So the no loss of capabilities there is really important to me because traditionally that's been kind of the crux for web apps, right? Is you can sure web apps are cross-platform, but you didn't have those capabilities that you needed to build a lot of certain classes of apps. That's much less of a thing now. If even I would even hazard to call it non-existent for I would say like 95% of the kind of applications you would want to build, everything from games to web conferencing applications like the one we're using now, etc. And then how. So I've talked a lot about what, why, but how real quick. So I'll show you how to use PWA Builder real quick to package your application for the Google Play Store and potentially the Microsoft Store too, if you would like. Like I said, PWAs make use of new APIs in the browser to enable, these app-like experiences that users expect. And yeah, it's still just building a web app. So if you've ever built a web app before, especially like a, more modern kind of single page app style web application, you are already like 90% of your way there to having a great PWA that is ready to go on devices, including with the CSS utilities that Craig just showed, really good dual screen support. So real quick, I wanted to, just before we jump into fun stuff like PWA Builder and demos, wanted to give a quick update on Microsoft Edge for Android. So as Craig mentioned, it now runs on Chromium. So it's the same version of Chromium as the new desktop Edge. Because of that, there's matching capabilities. And I actually have kind of a cool little demo site to show all the different capabilities that you have. There's an updated design. So for example, you'll notice that like the bottom menu is a little bit different. The top bar is a little bit different. It looks really nice on Surface Duo. And yeah, updated features to match desktop Edge too. So like collections, all of that good stuff. But the really big thing for developers there is the first two lines there, the same version of Chromium as desktop Edge and matching capabilities. This means that you always have that updated version of Chromium. So that's another cool thing about web apps. The platform underneath is moving normally pretty fast, even though it is based on these web standards that have to be decided by, many groups at a time. And it continuously updates on a much faster cadence than most underlying application platforms. And then, yeah, matching capabilities to the desktop Edge. Like I said, I have a pretty cool demo that I'll show here in a minute that shows really the amount of capabilities that are there that your application may need. All right, so PWA Builder. So this is where I'm about to get out of PowerPoint actually, but just to kind of go over some key points here before I show how it works. So this was built by my team actually, or the team that I'm on, PWA Builder. It was built as a collaboration with Google. So like Craig before mentioned, there's a lot of collaboration with Google. My team has also collaborated with them. So the PWA Builder functionality that I'm fixing to show you is actually powered by the open source Bubble Wrap tool from the Android team. So Bubble Wrap is a CLI. Basically, we're running it in the cloud, but it's a CLI tool that enables you to package your PWA as a native Android application, as an Android app bundle or Apex, not Apex, Android app bundle, and whatever the other that I just blanked out on for the Google Play Store. PWAs in the Google Play Store also get special treatment. I wanted to show that real quick, point that out. So for example, normally on the web, if you notice geolocation, for example, the user will get a prompt saying, hey, are you cool with us using, your permissions? Native applications in the Google Play Store don't have to, they have their own individual prompt. It's not the web prompt. So for PWAs in the Google Play Store, they will get that native, only use my location while the app's running or something like that prompt, which is really cool. You also get push notification permissions by default. So just like a native application in the Google Play Store, PWAs get those same kind of default permissions. And yeah, I'll show in a minute, it works on any other app in Android, including in the app menu, home screen, app settings. So let's jump over to PWA Builder and actually show how to package my PWA real quick. And then I'll jump on to Surface Duo using the Your Phone app to kind of show you how some of these things work. So give me a minute just to reshare my screen here. Let's see. And I'll have to reshare real quick so I can share Edge. All right. So real quick. So this is the PWA that we're going to be packaging today. So this is, of course, running on my Windows device here, on my Surface Pro X in the browser. But this is the same PWA that I'm going to show you running on Surface Duo right now. So already we're looking at cross-platform, right? I'm running it on Windows, but we're fixing to package it for Android, and I'll show you the same code base, literally the exact same code base running on Surface Duo. So to package our PWA for PWA Builder, I'm going to keep this quick. We have a lot of documentation that goes into more details and stuff, but just to show kind of how it works and how easy it is. So I already have a PWA. That's really the hardest part, right? Is developing your application. Once you get there, you're already most of the way there. I'll hit enter. PWA Builder is going to then load up my application in the background, take a look at a few things such as, do I have a manifest, a service worker, security? Real quick, manifest and service worker, these are kind of the basic defaults for progressive web apps. I'm going to share some links at the end of the talk that goes into more details about this. But basically what a web manifest is, and if you click on it, PW Builder will give you more information on it. It's basically like a JSON file that has all of the metadata for your application. So kind of all that stuff that you're normally like used to, maybe setting up an Android Studio or some of this stuff even in Google Play, the Google Play console. The manifest.json is same idea, but it's even simpler in my opinion, because it's literally just a metadata file, a JSON file. The other thing is service workers. So a service worker, there's really, a lot of good information on there that really goes into more details. I'm going to kind of skim over the top here. But basically what a service worker is it's a script that it's a JavaScript file that can be spun up and down by the browser independently of your application running. And what it allows to do is a lot of different features. So you can think of it as like a proxy between your app and the network. So it allows you to do dynamic caching of assets, network requests. You can, for example, cache all of your JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. So not only does your app work offline, but it also, almost more importantly, in my opinion, opens and launches much faster for the user, and it has that that native application feel, where as soon as you touch the application, as soon as you touch the icon, boom, it's there, and you can see it and start using your app. Service workers also enable things like push notifications, background sync, all of these really cool APIs that I'll kind of go through a list of here in a second. And then, of course, security, that's just looking to make sure you have a good HTTPS setup. HTTPS is required for PWAs, and it's also required for a lot of the APIs, these advanced APIs that I keep mentioning, such as Bluetooth, push notifications, background sync, etc. Those also require HTTPS for kind of obvious security reasons there. So I'm going to hit next at this point. All right. So now we're at the publish page of PW Builder, which is kind of the most exciting page. So this is where you can choose all these different, choose Windows or the Android platform, and then you can choose, do you want to store package, or for Windows, for example, we also offer a test package that you can quickly, you can use to quickly test on your Windows device. But for Android, I'll hit store package. So as you can see here, PW Builder fills out a lot of these options for you by default, but I do recommend going in and kind of taking a look at them yourself and making sure that everything looks like you want, because again, like I said, these are defaults set by our code that are kind of making assumptions. You want to make sure that you have your settings where you want them. But I will say most of our assumptions are normally kind of the best practice defaults. So you should be good to go. But as you can see here, there's a good bit of things you can do. You can even get the source code if you want. So we send down an already packaged Android app bundle. But you can also get the source code if you want. So you can of course use Android Studio to build it and stuff like that. There's also signing key stuff here, and if you hover over the question marks and click, you can get some documentation. But yeah, there's a lot of good options here you can look at, and like I said, I do recommend looking at those when you go to actually package your application for the Google Play Store. I'm going to hit generate, and this will kind of be the last step of the PW Builder demo. So what this is doing is, like I said, calling out to our services in the cloud and running that bubble wrap tool from Google to package our PWA as an Android application. And yeah, that's really like how easy it is. That was like, what, 3 to 5 minutes maybe. And all I needed was my URL to my PWA, which any PWA is going to have a URL, and then you're ready to go. So I would hit download here, but because of the way I'm sharing my screen, it's not going to show the file picker. But what this does is download a zip folder that has your application in it, and then it has a link to our documentation and a README and all the kind of good stuff that you would want to have when you go to get started on this on submitting your application. So let me just time and all right. So that was talking about what PWA is, a little bit about Edge. And then jumping into how you can package your PWA for the Google Play Store. But next is kind of my favorite part. So I'll go on to my Duo and actually show kind of how some of this stuff works, what you could do with a PWA, and kind of the one of my PWAs is actually Webboard that we use as a demo on my team, and how I kind of modified that for dual screen, but also how good it works with inking. I think inking is really cool. And yeah, I'll show you some cool stuff Edge has going on there with inking. So let me share my screen one more time. All right. So first, we'll jump into Edge. So earlier I was saying this is the application. So this is the one I was just showing how you could package. So this is it running on Windows. And you can see it's webboard.app. So now I'll jump over to the Your Phone app. Make that full screen. And as you can see, this is now the same application. So I'll actually swipe that demo away for a second there. So this is now the same application running on my Surface Duo. So this is not a Surface Duo 2. This is a Surface Duo 1, but your application is going to work the exact same on Surface Duo 2. So as you can see here, this is Webboard running on the side. You can see over here in my app drawer, I have Webboard. So it shows up right there alongside all my other native applications, such as Edge and the Settings app. And you can see it's right there. It would also show up in your app settings. It can also show up on your home screen. And yeah, it gets, you can pin it just like any other application. It even supports, shortcuts. So pretty cool. So this is it running on, single screen, but using some of those CSS utilities that Craig showed earlier, I have modified my application to provide some better support for dual screen and take advantage of the extra kind of, real estate that having that spanned application on a dual screen device provides. So you could see there, for example, if I go back to single screen, I have the buttons up at the top. This is kind of a standard like Android UX setup. Now, I'm not a designer, just so you know, but this to me, feels like a very kind of standard Android, application view. I can also, of course, change colors, etc. But we'll go back out to here, and there is a slight bug there that I have to do. But you can see at this point, my application then immediately modifies itself to fit this dual screen setup better. So my controls are off to the right side. I'm even able to have my animated windows come in on the side that I want to. All my colors work, etc. And I can also use my pin. So as you can see there, the latency may look a little slower just because I'm using the Your Phone app and it's being streamed. But the cool thing that's going on underneath the hood there is it's using a new Microsoft Edge Ink API, which enables you really low latency drawing, but still using just the standard HTML5 Canvas API that most of the web developers are familiar with. So, for example, all of the drawing logic that is going on here is just standard, JavaScript Canvas drawing logic that you could find tutorials for on MDN, for example. But there's like 2 lines of code that you have to add using the new Microsoft Edge Ink API, and I'll put a link into the explainer for it at the end of the talk. But yeah, that enables extremely low latency inking with really only like 2 lines of extra code to your Canvas code. And yeah, you can see there I'm using my Surface Pen right now to draw. It also supports touch, and yeah, it's a full-on inking application, but it's built in the web browser. And as you can see, it runs just like any other Android application on this device. So I'm not like sacrificing any kind of capabilities or some kind of certain like design or certain way that PWAs get presented on Android compared to a native application. Instead, my app gets treated just as any other app on Android, which is nice. That's how it should be. Just because it's a web application doesn't mean that it should be treated in any other and a special way on Android. So speaking on capabilities too, so I just talked a little bit about low latency inking and the new Edge inking API and kind of how PWAs work so well on Android. Speaking on capabilities too, so there's this cool website you can pull up. I would actually recommend pulling it up on your device in your preferred browser and seeing what your browser is capable of. But this website, I'll scroll through as I'm talking here, gives you an idea of all the different capabilities that are allowed or available in your browser. So as you can see here, there is a ton of stuff, even just in the first kind of 2 boxes here, right? So you can do push messages, like I recommended, or like I mentioned earlier. So these are push notifications, just like you would be familiar with any other native app. On Android, they show up just the same in your notifications window, just like any other application. Now we have payments. So the Web Payments API enables you to do very quick, where people can basically pay very easily with Google Pay, and it ties in, and you can customize all your logic there. Local notifications, user idle detection. So, detecting if the user is in idle state at the moment, or not using their device actively. Task scheduling using the request idle callback API. You can install PWAs from the browser too, which I'll show in just a second. There's Bluetooth, NFC, which the new Surface Duo 2 has NFC. So you can use the Web NFC API to take advantage of that capability and integrate that into your app. You can see the list kind of keeps going on, right? Real-time communication, video recording, advanced camera controls. You can even see how much memory the device has, battery status. You can ask the device to vibrate. Advanced touch gestures. I mean, the list just keeps going on, right? And this is in the latest stable edge. So this isn't even like, Canary Edge or beta edge. This is, standard browser that comes on a Surface Duo device. So as you can see there, the browser is not lacking any kind of capabilities that you would need to build, most applications. I mean, when you get in here, you can even do web Bluetooth and stuff, which is, I wouldn't say there's even a ton of native applications that use Bluetooth. There's no lacking of capabilities here from using a PWA. Now, real quick, I wanted to show, let's see. So, as I mentioned, on the right there, we can see my PWA running, installed from the Google Play Store, but it also, of course, runs in the web or on the browser. So because this is a web application, I can also attain users through the browser. So this is another cool thing about PWAs. You can, because it's a web application, it's going to be distributed through the web browser. It can also be distributed through app stores. This gives you two channels of acquiring users, and acquiring two different kind of users normally too. If you get users through the Google Play Store, for example, they are looking for an application experience, which they may not be looking for in the browser, and therefore tend to maybe be a little bit more engaged of a user. So they can be, very, very valuable users if you're, looking for engagement metrics. And the other cool thing is you can also install your PWA from the browser too. So not only can users install your PWA from the Google Play Store, but they can also install them straight from the browser application. So you can see here, I'm using a component that I built that ties in with that installation API to enable users to install that application straight from the browser. So as you can see here, there's a lot of room for kind of user engagement and acquiring users from all the different places that the web kind of runs on Android. All right. So I'll hit stop sharing there and get back here. Cool. And yeah, that's about it. I hope I didn't take up too much time there. It doesn't look like it did. Cool. And I'm seeing some thumbs up and all that good stuff. So that's it. That's PWAs on Surface Duo, and I'll hand it back to Craig.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Justin. That's an amazing list. Like, I love that. Yeah, offline storage, as well as, like you said, NFC, payments, all that stuff. And one of the things that we probably didn't have enough time to talk about today that I love about web development, and the Surface Duo dual screen stuff kind of exhibits it as well, is that sometimes it can be easier. You get the cross-platform benefit, but web APIs are exposed in such a way that they're easy to adopt. Like to build a dual screen app like you've done with Webboard that adapts to the dual screens just using CSS, like that CSS stuff is so powerful. And people that are writing stuff like natively in Android and adjusting their views, it's a little bit more work for them.
Exactly.
That sort of stuff.
Yep, exactly. And that's actually a good thing to point out. So even I mentioned with the Canvas API, for example, that new Ink API that's coming from Edge, that's literally like 2 lines of code, right? And then when you go to the dual screens, especially the CSS stuff, which is just so everyone knows, mainly from when I built applications so far, PWAs, the CSS API is mainly what you need normally. I've only run into like 1 or 2 use cases for the JavaScript side, although it's obviously very cool that that's available there too, because that opens up some very advanced things. But the CSS is like, it's not a ton of API surface, right? So I feel like it's relatively easy to kind of get started with. And yeah, Webboard, I think I converted it in like a night to support dual screen. Again, I'm not a designer, so I'm not saying it's like the best like setup in the world. But yeah, I was able to do it very quickly. And yeah, you can adopt it kind of at your own pace too. So it's really cool and yeah, very relatively easy to get started with, kind of compared to, like you said, Craig, more of the native like Kotlin or Android side of things.
Yeah, for sure. I noticed there is one question in the Q&A, so I'll read that out. The question, I think, was from earlier in the talk. If I work on Android native in Android Studio, can I embed your library? Which I think is actually referring to the one I started talking about, the Kotlin example for actually building apps in Android Studio. So I will paste our docs link maybe into the chat, just for folks that want to click over to that right now. But the answer to the question is yes, you can include Jetpack Window Manager in your Android application using Android Studio and build apps that can respond to being on one or two screens on the Surface Duo, on the Surface Duo 2, and on foldable devices from other manufacturers. Maybe I'll just quickly share my screen so I can show our docs and just help folks find their way to it. So this is docs.microsoft.com/dual screen. And here we want to support developers, no matter what language they like, no matter what tooling they're using, they can get their apps onto Surface Duo and Surface Duo 2. So it starts with Kotlin and Java, and we have a lot of code examples and documentation there, but we also cover Flutter, React Native, Xamarin, which is .NET and C#, Unity, game development, which is a huge chunk of the Android gaming market, is also C#, and the web, which we talked about today. So the question was about native and using Android Studio. So if I click through here to Jetpack Window Manager, this page is really the answer to that question. It's got the instructions you need to be compiling with SDK, API level 31. You want to bring in the Jetpack Window Manager library, which is Android X.window. And then, the code examples are given right here. It's very easy to get started. There's a few kind of snippets here to help get started. You can see this code is checking the folding feature concept that I talked about earlier. And then, it links off to a number of examples, which is another page. And you can see them here. There's an ebook reader, there's a folding video and chat, photo, source editor, a to-do app. So in addition to, the documentation to get started, we've also got a number of examples of how this stuff works that you can read and understand and maybe use that code in your own applications. And since we talked about web and PWA today, I will say that we have that same information available for web developers, the simple boxes that we talked about, photo gallery, which is part of the other contributors to the CSS proposal. And there's a ton of other information here for people using different tooling, different languages.
And actually, just to add to, I'm going to throw another link in the chat. So the demo that I showed today, Webboard, so that's actually an open source PWA under the PWA.org on GitHub. So I'll share that too. And yeah, that way you can kind of see how it's built, and you can see how I've used the dual screen APIs there. Yeah, that application also uses a lot of those other advanced capabilities that I mentioned, so you can dive in and kind of see the code for those. And it's also built with I think it's a cool library, Stencil, which is like a cool web components framework to enable you to build really lightweight PWAs, but with a similar development experience to something like React. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I just saw someone else post a question. I think it's definitely one that you might be able to answer better than me, which is the status of PWAs on iOS.
Sure. Yeah. So this is always kind of a tricky question for me to answer, of course. So nothing against like Safari or iOS, but yeah, the PWA compatibility on iOS is lacking in some key areas. But I want to dive into that just a touch. So a lot of those advanced capabilities that I just scrolled through on my Surface Duo, for example, are not available in Safari. Now, they're available pretty much everywhere else. Firefox even supports a lot of those APIs. Chromium-based browsers such as Edge, Chrome, Samsung Internet, Opera, etc., are all going to support those capabilities. So if you're working for Android and the web, you can be sure that those capabilities are going to be there. Now on iOS, most likely they are not. It improves with every iOS release. Some of the key ones there, like push notifications, are available. But yeah, something like Web Bluetooth or Web NFC or even like background sync and that kind of thing are not going to be available on iOS. Now, I caveat that with web content works very well on Safari, and because your PWA is still a web app, right? When someone pulls it up in Safari, it's going to be treated just like Safari treats any other web application. And one thing I can say about Safari is it is fast. It is a very smooth browser, and your web app is going to work just as well there as it would anywhere else, just without those advanced capabilities. So you need to use the things that we're all kind of used to as web developers, like feature detection, to be able to decide there. For me, it's really only a blocker. iOS, is a blocker for your PWA if something key in your app relies on one of those APIs that may not be available on iOS. I would just recommend looking into kind of your application, pull up that what web can do link on Safari, and kind of decide based off of that. I guess real quick, I've also seen teams do a PWA for both Android and Windows, and macOS and others, and then do a native app for iOS. So that is also something you could do if you want. And I will also mention actually too that Safari does support. So you can't ship PWAs to the Apple App Store yet, but you can add your PWA from the home screen on Safari. It's not treated as like Surface as much as it is on most Android browsers. But if you go into like Share and then you slide over and then add the home screen, it will be opened in its own application. It will have its own icon, etc. Then. So yeah, I know that's kind of a complicated answer, but to be honest, it's a little bit of a complicated situation. So, but hopefully I answered that.
Makes sense. I mean, it seems like there's still a lot of avenues for getting your web content on iOS. It's just, not as cool.
Yep.
PWAs can do everything everywhere else, and then just slightly less.
Yep, exactly. And to be fair, Safari has kind of been like that before. So a lot of the, conferencing applications that we're all using nowadays to work over the web, Safari just enabled WebRTC like a year or two ago. So for a long time before that, most people had to use other browsers to do Zoom or, any other call. So it's not something that's new to Safari. It's just, again, something to definitely be aware of.
Cool.